This is Andy Gutierrez from StarWars.com, and you are listening to Coffee with Kenobi with Dan Z. This is the podcast you're looking for.
This is Vanessa Marshall, Harrison Dula from Star Wars Rebels, and you're listening to Coffee with Kenobi.
Hello, my friends, and welcome to Coffee with Kenobi, show number 485. This is your spoiler-free place for Star Wars discussion, analysis, conversation, community, and so much more. I am your host, Dan Z. Thrilled to be talking Star Wars with each and every one of you. You can support Coffee with Kenobi by following the show on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, and TikTok, and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Help spread the word that you're listening to the show by tweeting it out, share it on Facebook, or invite your family and friends to tune in and share a cup of coffee with all of us. If you are planning on going to Star Wars Celebration this year or want to go on a vacation, be sure to check out MEI and Mousefan Travel at www.coffeewithkenobi.com/mousefantravel for a free, no cost, no obligation quote. On today's show, Tom Gross returns as we look at Chapter 2 of the Book of Boba Fett. It's a spectacular episode I can't wait to break down. So let's go ahead and pull up a chair, grab your favorite coffee mug, and let's have some coffee with Kenobi.
So who talks first? You talk first? I talk first.
Joining us today for a cup of coffee is, well, how do we introduce you? Sometimes Corey says guest host, even though you're not a guest. You've been on the show countless times. So, of course, if we're going to review an episode of something Star Wars related on Disney Plus, we got to bring in Mr. Tom Gross.
Hello, everybody. It's great to be here. And what fun to talk new Star Wars each week for a little while here with Boba Fett. So yeah, I'm glad to be on. Love to talk about the new stuff.
Yes, I'm glad to have you on. It's just going to be the two of us flying in Boba Fett's starship today as we cruise through the second episode of the Book of Boba Fett. Did you catch the title? I missed the title.
I went to look it up and I didn't. It's not listed in the queue of the on Disney Plus.
It's something to do with the Tuscan village.
Oh, okay.
To some degree, I can't remember. Well, anyway, I undoubtedly will be tattooed in our hearts and minds later. We're going to talk a lot about this episode. We're going to do what we always do. I'm going to get an overall feedback from you because we worked together today. It was our first day back at school, but we did not talk at all about this episode. So I am as looking forward to this as anyone listening to the podcast right now. Overall reactions and letter grade.
Oh yeah, overall reactions. Well, you know what? I'm going to start with letter grade if you don't mind, because last week I gave episode 1 a B+. So if last week was a B+ for me, this week is an A-. I think it's stepped it up to the next level. Really, really enjoyed it. I mean, there was no letdown on any level, and it advanced many of the things that we had talked about last week. It advanced those ideas and concepts for me this week. So I'm really excited to talk about it, break it down, because we have some current and more flashback and more completeness with some of the flashbacks. So I'm excited about that.
All right.
A-.
So you said A-. Interesting. As for me, we heard what I said last week. If you listened to the show last week, I enjoyed last week. It didn't blow me away, but it was a solid episode. But it felt like we needed more. And this episode, we got it, baby. We hit the home run. To me, this is an A+. This is an unequivocal A+. There is no doubt in my mind. I've actually watched it a couple of times, and it completely blew me away. It's almost a 180 as far as the enthusiasm or adrenaline needle would go compared to the first one. In fact, I would only say this to all of you listening, our friends, because we're positive, spoiler-free, family-friendly. Yes, we're talking about the episode, so if you haven't seen the second chapter of the Book of Boba Fett, please pause us and then come back after you've seen it, because we were going to talk a lot about what happened. So there will be spoilers, but we are warning you in advance because this is a review of the show. But I would put this episode above The Rise of Skywalker in entertainment value-wise and power to what it does for the overall arching mythology of Star Wars. Because you've got Jon Favreau writing the episode, and you've got I mean, Dave Filoni isn't specifically credited with anything with the story itself, but that guy knows the Star Wars mythology as well as anybody, probably better than George now because of his involvement with Lucasfilm over the since Clone Wars started and in books and comics and just his direction. He's steering that ship. The two of them, like the two of us, we love our Star Wars. We love talking about it. And boy, does it show. I mean, it's spectacular. It's absolutely spectacular. So let's just talk about it right now.
All right.
Let's talk about the opening, which the entire episode does bounce from present to past. The majority of the episode is in the past in the flashback sequence, which I've come to really appreciate and value. What did you make of the opening sequence before we get to, I guess, the big showdown with the Hutts? Because to me, what jumped out was the use of humor. But I want to hear what you thought.
Oh, yeah. So this is where they, Fennec Shand, opens with Fennec Shand bringing that assassin to the palace, Boba Fett's palace. And I guess it was exactly what I would have expected. They brings him up in front of the throne as Jabba would have. And the assassin doesn't want to say anything. Interesting. I guess my pauses are from your comment about the humor, and so there are a couple places that jump out at me as being somewhat humorous. The first one is the droid. I'm not sure what to make of that white droid that sort of
AT-8.
narrates.
Yeah, mm-hmm.
Yeah. He says he's not going to talk, and then he says again he's not going to talk.
He's like, hello.
I wasn't sure whether that was supposed to be funny or not, but then I took it as such, and it was pretty amusing. And the thing that I really liked about this is besides the trick they pull on him, because the assassin will not talk, and I don't remember, he's an assassin of the Night Wind or something like that, which is kind of a cool name. But they finally say, well, Fennec Shand, I think, whispers loud enough for the prisoner to hear and says, well, maybe the Rancor will make him talk. And so they hit the button as they normally would. And so my mind went back to, okay, so maybe Jabba replaced a Rancor, maybe before he perished. Although the events of that were pretty quick from the Rancor to his demise, so probably not. And so the guy falls down there, and he's clearly terrified that Jabba has had a reputation of the Rancor. The Rancor is well known among the underworld, apparently. And so the assassin finally speaks, only to, it's empty. So this is what I take from that, because last week our criticism, if we had a criticism, the three of us, it's the absence of Fennec Shand, and like not much character there. And I would say if there's another criticism I have of this week, it's still I still want more of her character to come through, but we got more because she's the one that set up the ploy. She's the one that drops the joke of no one, it's empty, so we get a little bit of that. And there's a couple other places in the episode where we get a little bit of her and her character, but I thought that was great use of everything. Is that the dramatic irony of it that we know that makes it fun?
I think so. I love that, because when she hits the button and Mason and I were just kind of watching it, and then she says, well, maybe he'll talk to the Rancor. And he falls in the trap, because we were actually talking before, every time they walk across that thing, and I think we talked about it on the show last week too. I find myself thinking, oh man, wouldn't that be cool if the Rancor was still in there? And then when it happens, and I got the goosebumps thing, that it's not down there, but there's like a hope in your brain. You know what I mean? Yes. Not the same equivalency as when you see an X-Wing going into the light Star Destroyer, and it's Luke Skywalker, but just knowing that it's possible. And I was like, no way. And we were like, Mason and I were excited. And they open up the thing, and the Rancor's not there, and they say, there's no Rancor. And you see a little tiny rat or a mouse. Yes. That was hilarious. I actually, that little sequence, that combined with Fennec Shand saying that the assassin. What are they? The Night Wind? Is that what it's called?
Of the Night
Saying
Wind.
That they're overrated. You're just paying for the name. What a great line! What a great line!
Good,
You're paying for the name, and she's like cynical and skeptical. She showed more personality in that particular sequence than she has in the entire first episode. I really like that because this part of the story is not her story. But my guess is that they continue doing the flashbacks. Eventually, we'll see the two of them agreeing to work together and sort of how that relationship plays out. And I thought that was very special. I think that was needed, right? And then we get to go, we find out, through some back and forth that we go back to where the mayor is and we see that smarmy, patronizing, major domo of the mayor. He keeps going, apologies. In fact, all night tonight, whenever Mason was asking for something and I couldn't, whatever, I kept going, apologies. He kept going, Dad, come on. So that, that was pretty fun for me. But we get something, I think, pretty spectacular. Yes, there's a lot of nerves and a lot of nervousness. There's a lot of bravado as well. So, I mean, we're not going to summarize the course because we don't really want to do that. But tell me sort of like things that stand out to you about him actually meeting this Ithorian, which I didn't catch the Ithorian's name. I didn't actually watch it this time with the subtitles on, but it wasn't Dak-Ondar from Galaxy's Edge, unfortunately, but it was a very compelling Ithorian.
Yeah, I really liked the way they played that character, and I'm just gonna say I don't think I've ever said this on the show before. I love the way Ithorians talk, and then it's amplified, so you get that like guttural low, and it's just a few seconds ahead of the actual language that comes through the speaker system. I really think that's a cool feature of the Ithorians, but.
And that's like the translators. They do that in the comics.
Mm-hmm.
They put that in, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. Okay. So I thought the juxtaposition of the two I love the way you put it, the patronizing sort of assistant. Although I have to say, I really appreciate it when Boba Fett just makes the decision to go in, and that guy was really panicking and but he treated the mayor the same way he treated Boba Fett, which I was like, okay, so this is just the way this guy is. It's his position or whatever. But back to the mayor, I felt like he wasn't.
His name, by the way, is Mock Shaiz, Shaiz, and he's voiced actually by Robert Rodriguez.
Oh, okay. Very good.
Interesting.
So he wasn't what I thought. I was picturing something a little bit more magnified of the assistant. I thought the mayor was going to be patronizing. I felt like he was kind of like, I don't want to say all-knowing, but he's been down this road before and knows that Boba Fett hasn't been. I mean, he's dealt with Jabba the Hutt and probably many crime lords, including Bib Fortuna. And so, here's Boba Fett, famous bounty hunter, but certainly no crime lord. And so I felt he treats Boba Fett, but at the same time is kind of, let me give you a piece of advice. I wasn't sure what to make. What did you make of killing the assassin? Was that just is it legit, or is he covering himself?
Well, I believe they said they're not supposed to operate in Hutt space. Was that what they say? And so then he shoots him and says, "Thank you." Mock shoots him and says, "Thanks for returning him to us. Here's your bounty." And earlier, Boba Fett uses some inappropriate language. Says, darn well who I am, right? Don't play games with me, because they're still not taking him seriously, because he doesn't come in on his being hoisted like some sort of a god through the city areas, through the cityscape, down the streets themselves, and he just has a different way about him. I really like seeing Boba Fett, and they looking like the book, almost like he's trying to get into a nice swanky restaurant in downtown Los Angeles, but he doesn't have a reservation. So, and I was curious, what's Boba Fett can do? Is he going to shoot? Is this where he's going to break loose and say, I'm not doing this? But he's not the Kingpin from the Marvel comics. So he walks around the desk and just kind of walks right through, and the guy keeps going, apologies for the intrusion. And Boba Fett doesn't hear, just walks on past, darn well who I am. And I really like And, I'm just so compelled by what happened to him, because this character that we keep seeing does not appear to be the same character from The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, or from the comic books that take place between Star Wars and The Empire Strikes Back. So, but maybe we're seeing why he did change. I hope that we get some more concrete nuggets. Right now, it's not off-putting because I feel like we're starting to get kernels of it. In fact, you had mentioned to me at school, and we kind of go back a little bit to episode 1.
Yeah.
Something pretty clever about what might be going on with Boba Fett along the terms of, well, I'm not going to say it, but why don't you explain sort of what you were thinking?
Oh, sure. And this is a flashback to the first episode on this show. And that is that when we talked about how Boba Fett seems to be redefining himself. And so I took it a step further, and as he's coming out of the Sarlacc and he sticks his hand up out of the sand and he pulls himself out, it's almost like this is a rebirth of the character of Boba Fett, or him as a person. And so to me, the flashbacks came much, brought things much closer together. I know we're not quite ready to talk about the episode 2 flashback because there's major things that happen before we get there, but I'm starting to see why he is doing the things he's doing based on the flashbacks that we have experienced. And so I thought the same thing when he stood in front of that secretary that's like, "I'm sorry, your name's not on here." And I was like, "Dude, do you know who you're talking to? This dude stood with Darth Vader, for heaven's sakes."
That's right.
And I thought the old Boba Fett would have raised his rifle and put the gun to his head and said, "Get out of my way, I'm coming in." This Boba Fett is a little different. And I think it's him rediscovering who he is. I mean, he keeps saying, "I'm not a bounty hunter." Well, that was the old Boba Fett. So who is this new Boba Fett?
And will we look at Empire and Jedi differently once we've seen this series? Will it recontextualize and reframe him? Or are they really just taking someone who's basically a blank slate with a cool armor and making him into an actual 3-dimensional character? That might be more what's happening. We'll see. We'll see.
Yeah.
We find out that Mok Shaiz is actually not the person allegedly who has hired these assassins to kill Boba Fett. But they mentioned the twins. Right. It's not Luke and Leia. It's twin Hutts. No. What do you think about these Hutts?
Oh my gosh. When they came around the corner on what everyone else wants, Boba Fett to be writing on, I can't remember what they're calling it. Being carried by a dozen men. When they came around the corner, I was like, oh my gosh, what a great Star Wars moment that was. I mean, that was 100% solid, dripping from the screen Star Wars when those two Hutts came around the corner. And I love how the one has the fan, the sister has the fan, and the other one has like a mouse or a rat in his hand that he keeps rubbing on his face. I just thought that was great. But at the same time, while I'm enjoying that Star Wars moment, I realize this is in the world of Star Wars, this is a big deal. Here in flesh and blood are two Hutts in the streets that Jabba used to rule and Boba Fett's trying to take control of. This is a dire situation. And Boba Fett says to Fennec Shand, "Watch my back." And I thought she was going to say something like in the first episode, she says, "I keep my eye on everyone." I thought she was going to say, "I watch your back all the time," or something like that. But she had no words when the Hutts came around the corner.
So the Hutt, I don't believe we've ever heard the mention of Nal Hutta in any live action Star Wars. That's the planet where the Hutts originate from. They're all over. So hearing that was pretty cool. Mm-hmm. And then seeing these things, I did some history of the Hutts for the Star Wars book, and the twins must be a new creation for this. And I was pretty captivated with them. They look great. My challenge with the special edition and episode 1 is I didn't feel like Jabba looked like Jabba or sound like Jabba. But here, I feel like these twins who aren't Jabba sounded like a Hutt from Return of the Jedi. The gorgeous sound. Mason and I were just completely mesmerized by these poor individuals having to carry these huts. And even like when they shift their weight around as they're starting to turn, you can tell the immense weight of these horrendously grotesque creatures who are just so much slaves of their own passions. And it's just really profound and fascinating. But then something happened. I got so excited because we saw a character in this series live action. I did not expect. I mean, I said like 3 times out loud, no way. Yes. And Mason was looking at me smiling. He's like, who is that, Daddy? Who was it, Tom? I'm making you make the pronunciation.
Absolutely. Black Chrysanthemum. Woo!
Yes.
That was so awesome.
Has to be, right? I mean, it has to be him.
No. It's the shoulder, those spike shoulder plates that he has on, and he's massive. He's got more black fur than brown, and he's got just that mean growl. Like it's not a Wookiee, it's a like a monster kind of growl.
So this character is famous for the Dr. Aphra series as well as the Star Wars comic book series that Jason Aaron wrote. I think maybe Jason Aaron created the character. It must have been quite a thrill to see this character in live action. But for those of you who aren't aware, Black Chrysanthemum, that's how you say it, right?
Chrysanthemum, yeah.
I believe so. He is a cybernetically enhanced Wookiee. I'm pretty sure it was experimented on. And he didn't like that very much, of course. He's got a horrifically serious mean streak. He's gone toe-to-toe with Chewbacca before. And he's dangerous. So Boba Fett says, I don't care how many gladiators you bring out, because he did fight as a gladiator, right? That is from the comics. That, they're all, everything is connected. It's all canonical. Then he mentions a name and a place, and I didn't write it down. I should have. So those names and places may be directly from a comic book story, but I'm not, at least at the time of this recording, familiar with that.
I'll have to go back and listen to that. I don't remember hearing that.
But he's a great character. So that's tremendous. It looked like a CGI character from what I could tell.
The Black Chrysanthemum?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I have to be honest. When he came around the corner and when I settled down, I was scanning the backgrounds. I've only seen the episode once as we're talking right now, but I was scanning the background, looking to see if there's any character in the crowd that even remotely looked like Dr. Aphra, and I did not.
I know, same.
See it, but it was so quick back and forth. I was like, oh my gosh, this is unbelievable to see that character.
Because they're not together anymore, those Aphra and Chrysanthemum. So, but
no,
that was
But this would be before.
That was spectacular. Yeah. Well, it's 5 years after Jedi, even longer. And even longer than that, because I don't know what the time frame is between for season 1 and season 2 of Mandalorian. So it's got to be
so that's actually
Return of the Jedi.
It's quite a ways after the comics are.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
But we know Black Chrysanthemum is still around, and
yes, we do.
But just the fact that they're connecting a comic book character into this, and they really continue to open the gates. And the fact that it's in live action, I think, makes it even more special. So speaking of special, we get the flashback. And this is a very extended scene. It's the rest of the entire episode. I thought for the first part, for chapter 1, Stranger in a Strange Land, I thought the present was more interesting than the past. For this one, I enjoyed the opening, but the flashback to me was the absolute grand slam of the entire series. We see Boba Fett training with, I don't really know what to refer to this Tuscan as, but the ultimate BA Tuscan. I think that might be the unofficial moniker of this particular.
Yeah, he's not the
Tusken Raider.
chieftain. He's not the chieftain, but he's the next one down. But he clearly is probably the most accomplished warrior in the group.
Oh, easily. So they continue to train. I really like the sequence. At first, we were trying to figure out why is the Tuscan continuing to correct Boba Fett. And upon a second viewing, though, I think it's extremely clear. He's just not as crisp. He's not as sharp. He doesn't appear to be as committed, even though he is committed to what he's doing. He's clearly treated as an equal or someone that's an up-and-comer in the Tuscan, particular Tuscan tribe. But between that and the arrival of the train, we see sort of a brotherhood starting to form, as well as just some interesting connections, I think.
Yeah, I thought it was a nice jump from the end of episode 1. I mean, some things have happened, in this between end of episode 1 and the beginning of this next flashback. Some trust has been built. They've given him a training weapon. And so as a comic book fan, you make some mental connections between frames of a comic book. It's kind of what I felt like this was. At the end, the frame in the comic book of this, the chieftain's giving him the fruit with water, and now we're training. So I thought that was kind of a cool jump. And okay, I'm glad to hear that on a second viewing, it's a little bit more clear as to what the warrior was wanting him to do, because I'm like, gosh, he's committed. There's no doubt that Boba Fett is committed here. He's not going through any. I didn't feel like he was portraying any sense of like wanting to escape anymore. The trust has clearly been built. So it's good to know that the second time around, it's a little clearer that like, adjust your hand, put your hand here on the weapon a little differently, do this. But there is a moment right at the end of that short sequence where he holds the weapon straight up and down, and you can see the resolve in Boba Fett's. Tamura Morrison does an awesome job of portraying this whole growth. Boba Fett's an accomplished bounty hunter. He's a pro. He's better than a pro. And here he's relearning his entire life and like way of doing things, which I think is amazing. I come back to this. This is a scene that this flashback I'm going to come back to time and time again. I have no doubt, because I love the passion of the Tusken Raiders. I love the passion that Boba Fett is like taking in everything like a child. And you mentioned last week in how he has such a sort of a soft spot for the Tusken children. It just continues here more. And it made me think as I was watching it that he's almost approaching this like a child. And so I wonder if that was sort of being built in that first episode. But what a great, great moment. And then we were faced with a problem. And that is, as you mentioned, previewed, the train coming by. Now, I was watching this with my daughter. And I said, does that remind you of anything? She's a freshman in high school, so she's been through some basic U.S. history classes. I said, does that remind you of anything from United States history? And she was on it. She's like, well, didn't they like on trains going west, like shoot bison from the train and stuff? I said, absolutely. And I said, if there was a Native American around, they didn't pull back and not take pot shots at them either. And I said, it was a horrible thing. And so here we're seeing that mirrored in that sort of Western feel here of the Boba Fett show.
Absolutely. 100%. I mean, this is a direct connection to me, and like you were just saying too, that they're mirroring our American history. Like the Tuskens have become like sort of a representative of the Native American people, and then the plight. Even at the end when Fett says, this is their territory, you've infringed on their territory. Like this is almost like if we could rewrite history, this might have been something that we could do like in real life, and maybe that's too big of a jump, but I don't think so. I mean, how many times have I said that fiction, is obliged to tell the truth, as Mark Twain says? So you take elements of things from history and you're able to look at the story and recontextualize, reframe it for people to show them the perspective. Because to me, if you read something in a history book, it's very different from seeing it. Now, this isn't history. This didn't actually happen, what happened in the book of Boba Fett. But it, to me, it very much shines a light on the ugliness of American history. And I think it's really, really effective, as is the fact that, we saw in the book, in the Mandalorian episode, The Tragedy, the brutality that Boba Fett fought with. And I just assumed, well, that's just who he is anyway. But no, the way he was fighting with that Gadfi stick, however you pronounce it, so intensely, we're seeing, sort of the seeds of that. To me, it was like controlled ferocity and commitment, commit. It's like a form in martial arts, you commit to this frame, you commit to this pose. You don't go through the motions. I mean, what a great metaphor for life. There's a lot to like about what happens with Fett here.
Yeah, and that what you're just saying makes me jump to the end, like the end scene, which I know there's a lot more in between there, but like the ritualistic nature of the Tusken Raiders, they have become the most intriguing culture in Star Wars for me right now, and I'm sure that's probably what they were shooting for, and maybe not, but it definitely has worked for me. It started with The Mandalorian, but the Mandalorian sort of, we had those moments and took care of the Krayt Dragon and we moved on. And I remember having some wonderful conversations about the communication of Tusken Raiders. Now they take it a whole, like, you jump a chasm here of like Tusken Raider culture. And the things we learn, what's important about their culture, and some observations I made throughout this is like the children are really the ones sort of the first line of defense for the Tusken Raiders. Every single scene where something comes from exterior, whether it's the speeder bikes or I think Boba Fett sees the speeder bikes, but it's the train, or Boba Fett coming back from his dream. It's always the children and a dog, whatever those creatures are called. Do you know what those creatures are called?
I can't. I have to look in the creature.
Anyway,
it's too far away to reach.
That's all right. They are the first to see. And then you see another level of Tusken Raiders that seem to have the job of looking for that fruit that has the liquid. They called it milk, but it looks like water to me. And so there's another. So like when you look at the scene of the Tusken Raider camp, everybody has their job and their culture, and it really was strong in building culture. They all have their jobs and they all do those jobs. And it even seems like there's some color culture to it as well. Like the white sandy that like Luke Skywalker fought with C-3PO and R2-D2, those were very white, brown, tan robes. Whereas it seems the higher you get in the hierarchy of the tribe, your robes become darker, and you even get like the warrior had some red in there, and the shaman's colors were very deep and dark, even in the color. Oh my gosh, I am so interested. I'm so interested in Tusken Raiders now.
I know. I agree. Let's look at, I like that. Very good catch on the colors of what's going on there. So it'll be interesting to see if that's just tribal for them, or if it's just completely with all Tuskens. Because as we learned in The Mandalorian, you've got the Watchers, the followers of the way, and you've got other Mandalorians. So even though it's the same, that's also different. Is like Christianity, right? There's different types of Christianity. There's different types of certain things. So I think it's fascinating. So the train shows up. You mentioned what they do, how destructive it appears, and how casually they take the lives of these people. In fact, there's a really powerful sequence where Boba Fett helps save a bunch of them, but many of them die, and then they create this bonfire, and there appears to be their corpses are burned, and very much like the traditional older idea of how you honor your dead, and it's. It's like a senseless waste of life, and that was a big deal. So it affects him. Of course it does, because it doesn't seem at this point, to me anyway, that Boba Fett is using subterfuge or tricky. I legitimately feel like he wants to be a part of this. I really do, don't you?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, he's a part of the culture, and what I don't know if you call it a reward or not, but the reward is at the end they welcome him in, and they make him one of them. But I suppose before we get there, I have to bring this up. It's a bit of a rewind, and when he goes to acquire those speeder bikes, can I go out on a limb here and say that location in which the speeder bikes were parked, and he goes in and kind of roughs them up, is that Tashi Station? And is that, I don't know. Is that Cammy?
To me, people online seem to think that it's supposed to be Cammy and Fixer, who are a big deal
online. Okay. Oh, okay. So I wasn't too far off.
No, that was right on. I mean, they certainly look the part. I mean, and they're featured in The Last Jedi novelization, Luke even has a dream about how he married Cammy and never left his home planet at the very, very beginning. But in the in a infamous deleted scene, he tells Cammy and Fixer about the Star Destroyer overhead, and they don't believe him. And it's shown in the Marvel Comics adaptation of it as well. So yeah, that was a big one. Right. That's huge. Again, talk about bringing in a bunch of stuff. I mean, it seems like it would be them. So who knows? I would imagine that it is, but again, these details will come out as they decide to. But let's talk about the visit to the cantina. To me, this was the fight sequence I was hoping for in the first episode. And again, it's not bad that it didn't have in the first episode. Jon Favreau knows how to tell a story a lot better than I do, so God bless him. But this was the hero. This is why Boba Fett is tough and dangerous moments. You get to see him break into this bar. He rescues his people, unbeknownst perhaps to him. And he just takes care of business in like the ultimate John Wayne, Clint Eastwood tough guy way. And I think we need to just flat out embrace that this episode, like with the last one, this is a cowboy episode.
Yes.
Like we talk about a little bit with the Mandalorian, but that was more samurai-ish. No, this is flat out classic cowboy Western American film kind of stuff. And boy, is the payoff great. He throws that, I believe it's are they Nikto, I think, through a window, and then he's using the skills that he's used from the Tuskens to fight. Dude, it's awesome. It's awesome.
It is so phenomenal. My favorite part of the fight is when he uses the gun to like crack one of them on the head, and it breaks, and he looks at it and he just throws it aside. I love that moment. And then when you talk about the Western genre, I love the bartender at the end who's just like it happens every day, just sweeping up the glass off of the bar. There's no even acknowledgement from the bartender to Boba Fett of like, dude, you messed up my bar. Like, they're just happy that he got rid. It seems everyone's happy that he came and cleaned it up. The only
There's
problem
even
is now
like
they
we've
have to
never
deal
seen
with those. I don't think they're
just local toughs, but they got that thing on their swoop bikes that are also put on that house in the first episode too. That logo was there,
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we even get a classic Nutcracker moment, which you've never seen in Star Wars, but that was particularly painful and effective. That's probably the most family friendly way to say that.
I mean, when you're fighting with a gaffy stick, it lends itself to a shot like that.
Yeah, we've never seen that, so that was just a great moment. I think that's a highlight for me personally. So then he goes back.
It was great,
and he's got to train the Tuskens. Let's talk about the training sequence with the swoop bikes and getting ready for this assault on the train itself.
Yeah, we've spent the first two I guess the first half of this flashback scene watching them train him, and we see some of the techniques, the repeated motions, all of that kind of thing. And so he brings the swoop bikes in, and with his limited communication, helps work them through the troubles of it. And that what a great moment when the one Tusken Raider gets on the first one to test it out, and he shows him the controls, and the dude goes flying backwards. I mean,
it even sounded like an Ewok special effect when he went backwards too. It really did.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, I didn't even think about that. If an Ewok can just hop on one and figure it out, surely a Tusken Raider can do it too. But he's wanting more precision from the Tusken Raiders than some random Ewok chase through the forest. And so he goes through it all. And I think some of my favorite scenes of that are where he's teaching them to leap from one bike to the other, because it is failure after failure after failure. And I kept thinking, how often do you do that to like train it so hard? But then when we get to the heist, or not the heist, but just the taking down of the train, I'm like, oh, they're actually going to use this skill quite a bit.
Yeah, and it was a great metaphor for learning. In fact, I said to Mason, see, every time they mess up, or every time Boba Fett doesn't fight the way that the shaman or whoever the head warrior wants, then they just keep doing it. They don't get discouraged. They don't give up. They don't complain. They don't make excuses. They just keep doing it over and over. And it's like the Karate Kid or Rocky or insert classic warrior training sequence here. I also think it's important to mention, we haven't mentioned it yet, is that Boba Fett is learning their language and they're also starting to understand him. And he's using he's using some sort of a very early primitive form of sign language. It's not as advanced as what the Mandalorian uses when he talks to the Tuskens, but the fact that he's trying it, he never besmirches their culture or downplays their beliefs or their ideologies. He truly is sincerely ensconced in what they're doing, and it's very prevalent through his hands, through his language, through his body language, and I really like that quite a bit.
I think probably my favorite part of this whole sequence is what we begin to see as, and it builds in with the language, like you mentioned, and the trial and error, but is the mutual respect that both parties have for one another. He's learned from them. Now they're learning from him. They're learning each other's language. They're learning, and they're planning this attack. And so they're like full respect on both sides, which I think is really important.
It's so good. So they're ready to go. They even teaches the younger Tusken how to use the mirror to signal. Again, all classic Western things. So they're basically, what they're going to do is they're going to hijack a train. Another classic Western trope. And it's beautifully, beautifully done. I have a small confession to make that I may have said on a pour over a year or two ago. But a friend of mine mentioned that this episode reminds him a lot of Dances with Wolves. I've never seen Dances with Wolves still.
Oh, yeah. Oh, it's very good. I enjoy it. Kevin Costner.
Yeah, I know. So the actual train attack itself is very exciting. Every time that droid conductor makes things go faster, it amps the angst. And again, there's real loss. There's real cost. A number of Tuskens perish. We soon learn that these are the Pikes.
Yes,
from the Clone Wars and Solo, that are actually a part of this, that are doing this. And go ahead and talk to me, I guess, about what jumps out on this as well. I'm going to steal one right away, and it's when the Tusken who trains Fett, and I'm not sure if it's a male or female, but this Tusken jumps on this train and works his/her way through that train like Captain America in the first Avenger. It was so great. Like, I need a figure of this character post haste, Hasbro. It's such a cool thing.
That was a magnificent scene. And what I kept thinking, well, first of all, the realization that these are the Pikes that are on here. Like, when they're coming out, I just assumed it was the same race because in one of the earlier scenes, or like in a pass of the train earlier, it was those same creatures that were on the swoop bikes that were firing out there. At least it looked like it to me. Yeah. So when the realization was that I said to Kate, I said, "Are those Pikes?" And she's like, "Dad, I don't know who Pikes are." And I said, "Dude, think back to Bad Batch. Bad Batch. Or no, season 7.
They're in Bad Batch.
Yep. Clone Wars and Bad Batch." And I said Solo, and I said, "These are bad guys." And so when they were coming out, I thought, like, it just raised the intensity because of their reputation. And that when you mess with the Pike, you're messing with all of them. There's going to be spice on the train, and we know what happens when you lose spice. When Rafa,
what do you mean by spice? Yeah,
right. No, but so that realization was just pure joy for me. I also had flashbacks to Solo. Speaking of Solo, and when they were on trying to heist the fuel,
coaxium.
The coaxium from that rail train that was up high around the mountain. I love that this is a second sort of train chase in Star Wars, which I thought was phenomenal. And I love the idea it's a hover train that just flies over the sand of Tatooine. I mean, how cool is that? But there's a lot that goes into this scene, and a lot of frustration because the Tuskens just keep getting picked off. And But we get on top of the train, classic, the hatches pop open and someone pops up and you just, and there's all of that. And you hide behind the hatch of someone shooting back at you from the car in front. But it was a great edge of your seat type of a action sequence. I loved it. I love the conductor and all the like spindly little arms, and it just kept pushing buttons, and it would look out the back like a real conductor to see what's happening back on the train. There was so much going for it, and this like the I'm just going to call it like the Tassi Station fight. This one just upped it a notch and had some great revealing moments. But once again, we get back to the training on both sides. Boba Fett's hand-to-hand combat training that he learns from the Tuskens. The Tusken skill of using the bikes to get there. I think about it. Isn't it that a warrior? He kind of comes straight in at the train with his bike, and then kind of
it jumps off it as it explodes.
Uses the momentum of it to get into the car to just lay waste to those pikes that are inside that car. It was great. What a wonderful scene. I needed
cool
that.
He teaches. Same. It's kind of cool that they teach Fett about power, and he teaches them about finesse, the maneuverability of the bike and the train itself. And they both have it, but they both need it to be polished out on either side. So again, the mutual respect you mentioned is clearly an important factor of that. And also, there's a sequence when Fett risks his life to save a Tusken. He's going to fall off off the speed train itself too.
That's right.
So that's really, really good. Eventually get the train to stop. Boba has his first sort of I think it's really cool that he sits down on one of the containers or crates, almost like he will do eventually as he sits on Jabba's eventual throne. And he confronts the Pikes, who apparently are catfish. I mean, when they look very interesting underneath their masks. It even makes that great noise that Star Wars has built in when you depressurize a mask as you take it off. And I love the denial of the spice and what does spice look like? And if it's like, well, like that, how's this? Are you going to kill us? Well, how it just depends on how you answer. There's so much toughness and power, and he has yet to kill someone in a conversation, like a traditional crime lord would in Hollywood speak. But it doesn't take away from his power. And I love the fact that no matter what the world is telling him or what we are used to fictionally from a crime lord sort of a thing, he is not compromising and he's not losing confidence in how he believes things should be done. And I really like that a lot.
Yeah. And when I said earlier in the episode, when we talked about how I think the flashbacks are starting to sort of mold and we can see the connection to the current day Boba Fett, I think this mutual respect that he learned from the Tusken Raiders, because what does he say to, I think it was the mayor's assistant? He says, I plan, Jabba ruled by fear. I plan to rule by respect. And I think that's where the connection's coming in. And we're going to see that he's going to bring this together and show how everyone can have power together with respect. I think. I don't know, but that's the path I'm seeing now. Fingers crossed that maybe that's not the way it goes, which is what makes it exciting. But yeah, I really enjoyed that scene with the Pikes and how shocked they were when he said, "You're going to walk away from here single." He tells them exactly
single
how
file.
Do it. Yep. And they're like, "What? You're going to let us go?" Not the normal way of the crime world.
And does he call it black milk? Or no, he says there's milk in it. But what does he call that thing? Black discs?
Black fruit? Black fruit? Or I don't know.
Black fruit. It might be black fruit. And the milk is how these people have survived, and that's how you're going to survive.
You're going to survive that way too. Yep.
So then let's go ahead and take a quick break because the last 10 minutes of this episode, game changer, friends, a game changer. We'll talk about that after the break. This is Coffee with Kenobi.
This is Vanessa Marshall, and you're listening to Coffee with Kenobi.
We are back. We're going to talk about the final. To me, there's two major sequences at the end of this episode. After they have captured the train, they've broken open that water cart, and the water's just flying, and they're filling their cups, literally and figuratively.
Yes.
It's very inspired. They're very inspired. Boba Fett has proven himself time and again that this is perhaps even more demonstrative because of how he empowered them and lifts them up as they lift him up as well. And we even see that earlier when they're fighting and the lead warrior puts his or her hand down and Fett comes up. That's cool. So let's take them in order. Let's talk about the unique gift. Yeah. And what happens there? What a long, strange trip it's been, right? What Jerry Garcia would probably say to Boba Fett. Let's talk about that first. What stands out to you about this? To me, this is a very much full of symbolism. Yeah, not quite to the degree of the cave in The Last Jedi, but pretty captivatingly close.
That is exactly where my head went, because it's so trippy, kind of like that. But what I'm about to say, what a strange way to get him into that state of mind with a little lizard. I couldn't help but think of some children's books with this. But they offer as a gift, and he's like, a gift for me? And they open it, and he's like, oh, it's a lizard. Very good. But then they blow that powder onto his face, which must attract that lizard, because it jumps over and crawls right up his nose. I was like, whoa, what in the world just happened? But then he goes into this sort of psychedelic world. And he gets dizzy, and the camera work really gives us this idea that something is crazy going on in his head. But he really goes through some serious flashbacks of his life. We see him as a child. We see him watching his father fly away in Slave One while he's on.
And it's Daniel Logan.
Yeah. Yes. And then he finds himself at a tree, which, by the way, when I used to teach American history, early American history, when you talk about with Native Americans, the tree is so symbolic. I mean, even in mythology, Norse mythology, you have what's the tree called?
Yggdrasil.
Yggdrasil. And so here he finds a tree, and instantly, all of that kicked into my head. I'm like, wow, this is significant. Like, to the Tuscan Raiders, this is their thing. And he walks up to that tree, and I want to say that the tree sort of lured him over as if to give him that stick, but then the tree wraps him in and kind of traps him in that space. And I'm going to need a little bit of help, because, like I said, I've only seen it once. How does he get out of that and end up with his branch? I don't recall.
The Sarlacc and its arms and tentacles wrap around him, and it kind of takes on the persona of the actual branches itself. And then he breaks free, and then he's holding on to a pretty strong, powerful branch,
which goes along with that symbolism of rebirth. So that's right. He has the flashback to the belly of the Sarlacc and the Sarlacc's thing, but then it comes back to the tree. So almost like a Tuscan culture. I hate to keep going back to it, but
it's a baptism.
Yes, exactly. And I like that a lot.
You know what else it is too? Surely people have thought of this, and I'm seeing it online anyway. But how do you not think of kyber crystals and forging your own lightsaber? How do you not think of that?
Oh, I didn't.
It's so beautiful and fresh right there, and
super cool.
It's very cool, and the fact that these gaffy sticks that we're familiar with because of the Tuscan that raises it up in victory as it's knocked out Luke Skywalker. Those things, they all are unique. It's not like they walk into a Tuscan Raiders Walmart and just buy a bunch of them. No, they're all individually crafted. They mean something to each specific warrior, and it's just so smart and so inspiring. And there's so much beautiful Native American mythology enveloped in this sequence. That is terrific. I mean, it's him fighting his demons and crashing through, and it's almost like his trial. It's like it's not a Jedi,
No.
And despite what friends tried to tell me in the late 90s, because they read it in a book which doesn't exist, there is no Boba Fett was not a Jedi. I remember people telling me that, and of course, the future English teacher me would say, "Do you have a source for that? What book says that?" Guess what? There wasn't one.
There isn't one. Yeah, right.
But this is the closest that we've seen to that idea, and boy, does it just works so well. And I mean, this seems like a good topic for a future blog or something like that, because it's really, really terrific, really terrific. But what's more terrific, perhaps, or as terrific, is seeing him forge this gaffy stick.
Yeah.
Seeing him, the important part to me is, we're both educators. They show him how to do it, and then he does it. He actually crafts it himself. It's not magical. It's not mystical. It's his hard work. He even creates the etchings on the point itself. He smooths them out with like some sort of a knife and a woodworking tool. The mutual respect there it's just so powerful, so symbolic of forging your own path and your own destiny and acknowledging what has come before you.
Absolutely. And what I loved is, on the educational standpoint, since you brought it up, is it was kind of the I do, we do, you do. I mean, that craftsman, that whoever was showing him how to do it, it was like he showed him, and then they kind of worked it together, and then Boba Fett took it and made it his own. And it also reminds me of when you mentioned the Jedi and the Kyber crystal, but it also reminds me of another culture in which the Book of Boba Fett comes out of, and that is the Mandalorian culture and the armorer. They would go. Now, there wasn't much in the way of teaching. The armorer wasn't teaching them how to forge the metal. Why can't I think of it? Beskar. But that it's a ritual in the Mandalorian lore. And so the armorer, they bring it to her, and she forges it, and she creates it for them and stamps it and all of that. And so it is a wonderful, wonderful part. I mean, and what a surprise, in the large picture of it, what a surprise that it's the Tuscan Raiders that we're so focused on now. Something that in 1977 were such a horrific, scary, creature, when it shows up behind Luke Skywalker and breaks his rifle and slams that gaffy stick down, and Luke's rolling back and forth and tears C-3PO's arm off, and just now we see this. Although I will go back to, that scene that I talked about at Star Wars Celebration, where Anakin goes out, and has that interaction with the Tuscan Raiders. This makes sense, because they do take it. He rescues the one, he saves the one from dying overnight, and the tribe is there, and the one is about to kill Anakin, and the one that Anakin rescues stops him, and they just sort of they leave him in peace. And I'm like, okay, that could be a tribe just like this one.
Yes, it's very true. It's very true. I think this is one that we'll look at a lot. Because again, there's also something nice and very biblical about working with your hands and carpentry, and Jesus was a carpenter, and Joseph, his father, was a carpenter, and you just imagine the working together. And believe me, there is no ounce of my body that thinks Boba Fett is a Christ figure by any stretch of the imagination.
No.
But there's a very powerful biblical thing, and a notion of working and earning that just the blood, sweat, and tears. And there's just something very masculine about that I really liked. I thought that was a cool, positive portrayal. In fact, a lot of what we've seen with Boba Fett has been nice. It's been nice to see sort of like this mano a mano concept, but with honor from a cowboy perspective, not a samurai, but like a sort of a Western archetypal thing. I haven't heard Jon Favreau say that, but I'd be surprised if we didn't hear some sort of inkling about that as well. Yeah. So again, he creates his gaffy stick, and then we get this beautiful sequence that I'll let you sort of describe. I mean, we know what happens. We've seen it, but talk about sort of what goes through your mind as you're seeing Fett don the garb of the Tuscan.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. The end of this episode may be one of my favorite Star Wars moments, at least as I sit here today, because there's so much that goes on. He brings the gaffi stick and they bring him into this tent, and he stands there and they dress him. Mm-hmm. They put the robe over his shoulder. They put the wraps around his arm. They put they build it all for him. And it's like they're making him them. They're crafting him into
they're
one
making
of them.
Him new.
Yeah. And then what's absolutely beautiful is the Tusken Raider child comes in and takes his hand. And what I love the most about it is the Tusken Raider child, after he takes his hand, turns and places his right hand on the chest and like adjusts and just feels his robes as if he is, to the child, Boba Fett is now one of them. And it's like it's like pure innocent acceptance. Oh my gosh. And then where that leads from there is just absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, so he gets, now you see why he's got the black garb that he has at the end of The Mandalorian. And I remember seeing that. I very visibly remember seeing that and thinking, so this isn't more than him wearing a disguise. He looks like he's dressed in their robes. I remember thinking that, and it kind of passed through your mind, because then he gets the armor back and you forget about it. But as you see that, no, this is like him walking in their shoes. I've always said, since I've been teaching literature, that the reason I love teaching literature is it forces you to think about things from another person's point of view. It teaches empathy because you're walking in their shoes. Yeah. He's walking in their shoes now. And they have accepted him so much so that he's become one of their tribe. It's playfully done with the Ewoks and C-3PO in The Return of the Jedi. But here, this is much more like a Native American concept. And it makes me want to study more of Native American mythology because of what this represents and what it symbolizes. It's really beautiful. And at the end, you alluded to this earlier, but they're around the fire. And then he and the warrior, the tribesman explains things, and then they face off. And then they're not fighting and training. They're miming like these forms, like these martial arts sort of style forms, as they march around the campfire in a very tribal, primal thing, but with purpose and with respect. And it's almost like it's very much spiritual and communal at the same time. And Mason said to me, "Why are they doing that, Dad?" And I said, "I think it's supposed to be like, Native American tribes or tribes from around the world that have a sacredness and a connection to nature and to each other and their environment." Because talk about living off of your environment and thriving in it. It's just, there's so much to love. This is why this is an A+, because it's just so profound and exquisitely lovingly told. I think this is going to be a hard one to top, and they don't need to top it, but to me, it's really wonderful.
That warrior dance is so memorable. And there's so many like moments of that warrior dance. I love it when there's a shot where the lead warrior is sort of crouched and like stepping to time, and it's so powerful. And then the other Tuskens start to rise.
Kind of Hawaiian or Polynesian,
reminding me of is there's that Polynesian dance that many football players, like American football players, when they come from that culture, they will teach their teammates, and before the game they will do that, and they stomp and they're like,
and Tamara Morrison's culture.
That's exactly what this is.
Yeah, it's Tamara Morrison's culture as well.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. So it was a magnificent moment. And right there, I was like, this is why we are seeing a different Boba Fett in the present. Why he's not going to go back on his values, because these values are strong.
Right. He's just a long way from the kid who was obsessed with killing Mace Windu that we saw in the Clone Wars.
Oh,
there's been a lot of time between now and then, and he's grown up. He's not a kid anymore. Who knows if we'll ever see sort of the bridge between that Fett and this Fett. But what I'm seeing now, I said this earlier in the show, but Boba Fett isn't just a blank slate of some interesting character with a fascinating design. There's much more substance now, and I'm grateful for it. I want to see where it goes. I hope it lasts multiple seasons. I hope we get to see a lot from season 1. All I know is that this episode was tremendous. Is there anything that we didn't talk about for this episode that you want to bring up as we wrap things up?
The only thing I'll say, it was the fastest 50 minutes of Star Wars that I think I've ever watched. I was enthralled. The suture was strong. I was there on Tatooine with Boba Fett in both the present day and the flashback. That's the only thing that's left for me to say.
It's great. It's great. So is it still an A- for you, or do you want to bump it up?
I bump it up to an A. I still think I'm going to be wowed somewhere. Somewhere this is setting up something even better.
I agree. Well, be sure to let us know in the CWK Cafe or online anywhere you can find Coffee with Kenobi what you think about the second chapter in the book of Boba Fett, an episode we really loved. And we look forward to you joining me live on Monday night at 7:00 p.m. Central Standard Time to share your thoughts and get your top 5 ready for chapter 2 of the book of Boba Fett. This is going to be a hard one to come up with just 5. Legitimately a very challenging one to do, but what a great challenge. Speaking of great, of course, Tom, it was wonderful to chat with you about the book of Boba Fett and Star Wars. And naturally, you join me and Corey every week on CWK Prover, which if you are a member of the CWK Alliance, you get exclusive access to that podcast. Yeah. But that's not the only podcast that Tom is a part of. Tom, let the good people know where they can find you and your podcast.
Absolutely. Well, one of the best places to catch me is on Twitter at DraftLine. But yes, as you mentioned, I am co-host on Teachers in the Dungeon, which let me tell you, this Boba Fett series is inspiring me in so many ways to bring some of the Star Wars Tuscan Raider culture to some Dungeons and Dragons adventures. But yeah, Teachers in the Dungeon. And you can also catch me on my blog, Seeking Positivity in the Galaxy. So thanks again for having me on today, Dan.
Listening to Coffee with Kenobi, you are with Dan Z, the podcast you're looking for. This is
A big thank you to Tom Gross for returning to Coffee with Kenobi to share his thoughts on the second chapter in the book of Boba Fett. And I want to thank each and every one of you for listening to the show, both here and CWK Live, which you can find, again, Monday nights at 7:00 p.m. Central Standard Time on YouTube, on Instagram, and, of course, on Facebook for the live recording itself. And the great part about it is, of course, everything that you feel, if you want to join the show live, you get to hear your thoughts on the air with all of us, which I think is really, really fun. I know things are challenging right now, but if you feel safe and comfortable traveling, then you should go to MEI and Mousefan Travel at www.coffeewithkenobi.com/mousefan-travel for your free, no cost, no obligation quote. You can help plan your magical vacation with them and support Coffee with Kenobi in the process. Our CWK Cafe group is our spoiler-free, family-friendly, drama-free Facebook group. You can have your Star Wars thoughts, comments, reviews, and opinions on the Facebook group. It's a wonderful, wonderful place to find so many members of our Coffee with Kenobi Star Wars community. If you want to give back to me and Coffee with Kenobi, then you should join the CWK Alliance, where you get access to CWK Prover, the audio and video exclusive weekly podcast not heard anywhere else, at www.coffeewithkenobi.com/support, where 10% of your monthly contributions go directly to St. Jude Children's Hospital. www.coffeewithkenobi.com is where you can find our website, and there is Star Wars news, announcements, reviews, videos, and so much more. Email me at danz@coffeewithkenobi.com. Connect with me on Twitter at Mr. Zer, MRZEHR, on Instagram at DanZerCWK, and on LinkedIn. Speaking of LinkedIn, Coffee with Kenobi is also on LinkedIn, as well as Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest, TikTok. You can give the show a like on Facebook at facebook.com/coffeewithkenobi, or you can subscribe to Coffee with Kenobi's YouTube channel. Please take a couple of minutes to rate and review the show on iTunes or Google Podcasts. And if you want to pick up a Coffee with Kenobi t-shirt or some other fun tees designed by some independent artists, go to www.coffeewithkenobi.com/shop. I am also available to come to your school, conference, business, or organization to talk about how to tap into your strengths and help you build your brand and bring out your very best. Go to danzmedia.com and I can help you get that process started. Thanks again to everybody for listening to Coffee with Kenobi each and every week, both this show and the live podcast every Monday night on Facebook Live. I can't tell you how much I appreciate your kindness and support, and you, friends, are making the Star Wars community a positive, awesome place to be, and I am thrilled to share the airwaves with each and every one of you. Have a great rest of your week. I will see you on Monday night at 7 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time, and remember, this is the podcast you're looking for. Thanks so much, everybody.
This podcast is not endorsed by the Walt Disney Company or Lucasfilm Limited. It is intended for entertainment and informational purposes only. The official Star Wars website can be found at www.starwars.com. Star Wars, all names, sounds, and any other Star Wars-related items are registered trademarks and or copyrights of Disney and their respective trademark and copyright holders. All original content of this podcast is the intellectual property of Coffee with Kenobi unless otherwise indicated.
This is the podcast you're looking for.
There's no one here.